Well, welcome everybody. It's Monday, the 25th, 2025, here in August, and we're so glad you're with us on the Pipeline Report. We have an important topic today. We're talking about D.C., what President Trump has done, bringing troops in and dealing with the crime issue within D.C., and now he wants to move on to other cities and the controversy that comes with that, trying to clean up the disorder in America. Also, again, always talk about Israel, what's going on there. And then today we want to cover some key topics on the gerrymandering battle that's going on from Texas to Maryland, Illinois, California. It's going to really determine what happens in the 2026 election. So we want to make sure we focus on that today. So welcome, enjoy, and listen in as we go to the Pipeline Report. Well, again, welcome back. Pastor Tim Carscadden here, Christian Center Shreveport, but on our Pipeline Report with Zach. You just saw him here to my right in our new studio. We hope you enjoy the backgrounds. There you go. Thanks, Eric, our producer that's over there. We're thankful for him and what he's doing to help us today. And we've worked hard on this. Thank you, again, everybody that's sewn into the Pipeline Report, my podcast. And so we use those funds to help build this studio, and we're still have a little more work to do, but it's looking a lot better. We hope you enjoy the background, and it brings a better broadcast to you. Well, it's an important day. We try to come each Monday with you with the topics that we think are important for us to pray into, to stand and fight for. And today's a big, big day as far as America is concerned. Law and order. You know, President Trump campaigned on that, the disorder that's in our cities. And we're going to be honest with you, the worst crime in America that we're seeing pretty much almost always is in blue states, run Democrat-led communities, large population areas as always. You're going to have your most crime anyway, but especially when they're run by Democrats because of their policies, the cashless bail, such leniency on felonies versus misdemeanors. And we're going to talk about that today. But as always, we want to do Israel first. Not a lot of information going on there. But I do want to talk to you about yesterday. Let me play a quick clip here. This is what happened in Yemen yesterday. As Israel hit the bombs here upon Yemen. I don't know if y'all are seeing that on the screen. But they blew up parts of Yemen, the presidential palace, etc. I don't show that showing up on Restream. But anyway.
Put your screen back in.
Let me see here. I'm playing it. Well, anyway, it's just a quick picture of what's going on in Israel. There it is. I mean, in Yemen, as we see here, they're blowing up many areas of Yemen. You got to understand, each day, Yemen has been sending missiles into Israel. The world's not saying anything. No condemnation from the United Nations. Nothing that's going on there. And so they're responding now in like manner and beginning to deal with some of these issues that's going on there. So to pray for the military, pray for wisdom as they begin to respond to some of these attacks. The Gaza issue, Israel is going to take over Gaza City. That's the next step that they're going to do. Hamas came back to the table because of this, because of the fear of what was going to happen if they take that over. But it's still not enough. I think they're standing on the right principles that they want all the hostages back. Because of other world issues, it's becoming a back issue, which is good for Israel because they can kind of operate here with impunity and begin to deal with some of these issues. The only way to solve this problem, and President Trump has said as well, is to remove Hamas, and that's what we're seeing here. So watch this battle. Pray for the protection of Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I think that's the key thing that's going on there. Okay, so as we cover these next topics, I think it's very important. President Trump has sent in troops to D.C. Zach, why don't you speak to that first, and I'll get a clip ready for us. How important do you think it is that we're moving into D.C.? There's a lot of controversy of there's too much force. You know, they're too active, what the Democrats are saying. Too much force, too much persuasion in D.C., but this is what he campaigned on, isn't it?
It is, and the interesting thing you're seeing is the difference from the elites who are making these policies that are causing the crime rates to soar versus the people who live there. When the news organizations there do man-on-the-street interviews and they're talking to people in everyday lives, they love it because they're tired, just like in Chicago and other cities, they're tired of 3- and 4-year-olds dying from stray bullets. They're tired of when they're walking to and from their car to get to the work or to the bus stop to be able to go to work. The people who actually live in the city, they love the cleanup because a lot of it is people who aren't from the city, illegals who are causing these problems. And then obviously there's still a gang issue there. But what they're doing is they're cleaning up these streets, and CNN and people, even local news stations, are saying, well, crime's really stalled, but increases of people picking up major spikes in immigration arrests. Well, people who are there illegally, they need to be arrested because, one, they're committing crimes, but then, two, they're there illegally. And so D.C. has kind of been this sanctuary city, and Trump saying, look, enough's of this. This is how you deal with this. He's showing the country how to deal with this. And obviously Democrats are trying to knock places, the cities and states where these National Guard troops are coming from, saying, oh, well, they're coming from red areas, which we could get into that because Shreveport kind of got thrown under the bus here from Gavin Newsom. But the reality is look, these are federal troops that Trump can pull from, and he doesn't really matter. He's pulling from blue and red areas. And, even though there are areas like, say, Shreveport where the stats don't really line up and aren't really positive, for various reasons of past administrations who, quote unquote, were Democrat. The reality here is look, this is how you deal with it. You actually enforce the law that is already on the books. You don't need to pass a new law, change, whatever. And the big key here of something that is being pointed out now is that how crimes are being reported and have been reported and New York's a big example of this is, crime rates are going down. Well, why are crime rates going down? And in California, they're doing this is they're increasing the threshold of what it takes to report and even convict someone of a crime. We saw that during COVID. And so these cities are having an issue of lower crimes increasing, and people, and look, these people know the crimes, they know what they're allowed to do and what it breeds, and their interview after interview of store owners who are just like, there's nothing we can do. Yeah. And that's the sad thing. And what happens is what you saw with Bed Bath & Beyond this last weekend, getting a fight with Gavin Newsom of, look, they said, we're just not going to open a store in California. And Gavin Newsom tries to bash him, the current owner, but the current owner's like, look, we took a dying business, we've turned it over, we have $1 billion in revenue, and we're saying we're not doing business in California. So Democrats have a bad messaging on their part, and ultimately what it's doing for the people, say, of D.C., and hopefully, if they go into Chicago, if they go into New York, if they go into other cities, it can give them back a peace in their daily lives. And that's what they're hoping for, and that's what they're asking for, despite what these protesters who come in who usually don't live in these cities are crying about.
Yep. And Mamdani, as he makes a statement here, he goes the opposite of what President Trump is doing. He wants to end all misdemeanor charges, easy pass for criminals. So he's making this statement. So we're seeing dire contrast here between what President Trump is doing and what Mamdani is, as well as the Democrats. So today, President Trump did 3 executive orders. I'm going to play those here where we see what he did today. And I think these are important because he's going to deal with these issues. I think that's the very important part. So let's listen to what President Trump did. We'll break down each executive order as he gives it here.
Identifying jurisdictions what this executive order does, it charges your attorney general with identifying jurisdictions all over the country that have cashless bail policies and then it withholds or revokes federal funds and grants that are flowing to those jurisdictions to ensure that we're only supporting the people who have reasonable common sense policies around crime.
So what area does it cover?
Potentially anywhere that has a cashless bail policy, so some of the largest cities, some of the most left-wing states in America
Almost
have adopted.
all of them, right?
Illinois would be a great example of that, sir.
Oh, they have a great cashless bill. You don't even have to go to court sometimes. No, Illinois, I love that state. It's a great state, but it's run so badly by Pritzker. They threw him out of the family business and he becomes governor. Now he wants to run for president. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, we'll sign right here, right?
Sir.
So this is the first executive order.
So
cashless
important.
bail. That's a big
And this
issue,
isn't
Zach.
Republican, Democrat.
Yeah, it's one of the ways of lowering the threshold for convicting somebody. And what it does is it allows them to get back out on the streets, which is harmful to your everyday life. And you're seeing this more so in like New York, and you've seen it especially out of California, where what's happening is they're going and committing these crimes, and they're repeat offenders. And you saw this in the Lincoln Riley case of the gentleman who unfortunately was arrested and was able to get out because of cashless bail, and you know they're not holding him for whatever reason. It's these type of policies that Trump's trying to get rid of and say, look, this is costing Americans their livelihoods, and in some instances their lives. And so this is where just enforcing the laws on the books is kind of come into play, and that's what Trump's trying to get back to. And ultimately what he's trying to do is show the American people, look, this is how you deal with this stuff, despite what Gavin Newsom is saying on his social media accounts.
So here's the second executive order.
This is, and by the way, most Democrats agree with this, but this is just, we got to bring our country back. Okay? That's a big one.
Also on the issue of cashless bail, sir, this is a D.C.-specific executive order. In addition to the measures that we're taking that are quite similar to what we're doing around the country, in D.C. in particular, the objective is holding as many criminal defendants in federal custody and subjecting them to federal charges as possible. That means that they'll be held pre-trial in federal jail as opposed to just being cut back out on the streets due to a cashless bail policy.
Okay?
And this was a big one because Judge Perino was saying that their hands were tied because they were releasing these criminals right out of jail, and even though they had this new order in place, they couldn't prosecute. So this is an intervention here to make sure that the local D.C. laws that are preventing prosecution is going to be removed.
Yeah, and that puts it back in the so that these criminals aren't re-released, and that's what they're trying to get rid of and show. Okay, once you take these criminals, you hold them in the jail system so they can't be repeat offenders and or get away and move to a district where people don't know about them and then commit crimes that cost people lives. You can actually start cleaning up the streets, cleaning up the cities, cleaning up states and the country. And what he's trying to do here in D.C. is give the prime example of what it is and how it is more so to actually clean these streets up and to prevent these crime rates from just getting out of control. And so when you look at, they point out Illinois, obviously Chicago, but you can look at cities like St. Louis, obviously New York, and now you start, okay, the bigger cities, because here's what's going to happen is, let's take Shreveport, for example. Shreveport, okay, has a problem. Now, smaller cities like Shreveport or even smaller cities that have these problems are going to look at, okay, how do we deal with this? Whether they're Republican-led cities or Democrat-led cities, there are leaders who care about those cities, who care about their people, who are going to look objectively and say, okay, that doesn't work. We can't just, allow cashless bail. We can't allow catch and release these criminals who tend to be repeat offenders. And so the positive here is that, okay, if Trump can show that this is how you do it, you actually go back to applying the laws on the books, then these leaders, whether you're in a Republican or Democrat-led city, can start looking at, okay, this is how we do it. And we come together, as Americans here in dealing with these issues and applying law and order and not having a two-tier justice system.
Okay, so he keeps going. There's more executive orders. Here's another one after he signs this one. And this is the next one is
And we have the
about
room.
releasing
And by the way,
Attorney
the prison
General
they have in
to begin to look at
DC
DC policy,
is
which I think is very important because until
It's
those
horrible.
laws are changed, nothing's
People
going to
were
happen.
subjected to
So
live in that dog trap for so long, so unfairly. I have stories, you'll be hearing about them. That prison is horrible. Okay?
This is an executive order that contains a number of additional measures relating to crime and law enforcement in Washington, D.C. It charges, for example, your Secretary of Defense with establishing specialized units in both the D.C. National Guard and in National Guard units around the country, specifically trained and equipped to deal with public order issues. It charges all of your various federal law enforcement agencies with hiring additional personnel to allow them to surge personnel to Washington, D.C. to deal with the current emergency here. It does a number of other things in that space, and it also asks the Attorney General to look at D.C. Metropolitan Police general orders that have currently impeded law enforcement efforts in the city, and to potentially look at unwinding those that are stopping the police from doing their job effectively.
And are we going to ask this to be codified by Congress, all of these things?
I think we could potentially, yes, sir.
I think so. I think we should.
now there's the big statement that I think he said was right. It has to be codified. If we don't codify these laws, if, God forbid, a Democrat gets in office in 28, you're going to see a complete reverse of all this. So we've got to make this law. This gives some power to the Attorney General as far as, and Hegseth as well, because this is a setup for the next cities. They're going to, D.C. is a model, and then here we go, Chicago, Baltimore, Los Angeles, many of these other cities that are Democrat run that are rampant with crime. So this is a setup. See it bigger than, you need to look at it as a bigger picture than what he's just talking about.
Yeah, and to Trump's point here is these policies that are in place were codified to cashless bail, to catch and release, and to increase the threshold of what it takes to catch somebody and arrest somebody for a lower crime, and more so get rid of the lower crimes. And so if Trump can show here, and obviously he understands this, and his legal team do, and so does Attorney General Bondi. Let's codify, and more so, let's get back to a system of justice and righteousness. It's funny, we see that in the scripture, where those who commit a crime are held accountable for their protection. And this is kind of the role, this is the role of government and law enforcement here in that branch of the government.
And here's the last executive
I think
order,
we'll get
which
it.
is-
I think Democrats will
I really
vote.
didn't see this one
Well,
coming. I mean, I
it's
know
hard,
it's wrong.
it's hard to believe that they might
to
not,
burn
but
the
I think
American
Democrats
flag,
will
but
actually vote for this.
he's going to write an executive order on this issue as well. No auto pen.
There's no auto pen that can do that. Right? Look at that, Pam. Is that a good signature? Seriously, is that a good signature? Who can write like that? Nobody. I don't know. That's the other thing. I assume we're looking at the whole auto pen scam.
Sir.
Because the person that ran it said he spoke to it briefly twice about nothing. That means that all those pardons that he gave to some very bad people, very unpatriotic people, very evil people, it looks to me like those pardons are worthless. Because number one, you
This will
shouldn't
be
use an
another
auto
issue
pen
we're
very
gonna have to deal with
specifically.
later.
But if you do, it has to.
But that's going to be a little bit harder to do.
Yeah, he's going to focus on it and look into it. I know there's been reports that even
Yeah.
Bondi and Judge Perino talked about
Yep.
how they're looking into these things within the Justice Department. And so this is something to see because
Yep.
it's an unprecedented case. I mean, it's never happened before and is most likely something that's going to end
Now,
up
here's the
before the
last one.
Supreme Court.
It charges your Attorney General.
Would you listen to this? This is very important. Flag burning. All over the country, they're burning flags. All over the world, they burn the American flag. And as you know, through a very sad court, I guess it was a 5-4 decision, they called it freedom of speech. But there's another reason, which is perhaps much more important. It's called death. Because what happens when you burn a flag is the area goes crazy. If you have hundreds of people, they go crazy. You could do other things. You can burn this piece of paper. You can, but when you burn the American flag, it incites riots. at levels that we've never seen before. People go crazy. In a way, both ways. There are some that are going crazy for doing it. There are others that are angry about them doing it. Do you want to discuss that?
Sure. So what the executive order does, sir, it charges your Department of Justice with investigating instances of flag burning, and then where there's evidence of criminal activity, where prosecution wouldn't fall afoul of the First Amendment, and instructs the Department of Justice to prosecute those who are engaged in these instances of flag burning.
And what the penalty is going to be, if you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail, no early exits, no nothing. You get 1 year in jail. If you burn a flag, you get, and what it does is incite to riot. I hope they use that language, by the way. Did they?
Yeah, incitement is
Incite to riot. And you burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail. You don't get 10 years, you don't get 1 month. You get 1 year in jail, and it goes on your record. And you will see flag burning stopping immediately, just like when I signed the statute.
Okay, so he goes back into the statutes when he wrote that executive order. Now, there's a little bit difference in what President Trump was saying and what his advisor was saying. It's not just burning the flag. You have to actually be inciting something as well to get the year in jail. So it's not just lighting the flag. But I think the message is being sent out like he did with the statues, and it worked. All the graffiti, all that stopped on that issue. But I think for patriotism, I think this is a very important executive order.
Yeah, because when we look back over the protests and things that we saw over last year, especially coming out, responses from the October 7th, issue in Israel, the fights in Israel and between Hamas and Israel, is there was these disagreements, if you want to call them, where people ended up getting physically harmed. And so what they want to look at is, okay, if you want to protest, protest. But when that protest crosses that threshold, and this is what he's trying to define as what that threshold is, of inciting to violence, of inciting to, go after somebody, is that's what has to stop. And if this act causes that and leads to that, then that's something we have to deal with. And so there, and both the right and the left are having a misunderstanding on this. And so it's kind of a thing of like, look, it's not just this act, it's when this act is caused and leads to, and words of violence of saying, I'm going to, take you out. You kind of got to take somebody at their word, especially when they're in a vulnerable position. So good on Trump. And if you heard what his lawyer said there, is this gives the DOJ the incentive to go and investigate, not to just arrest and throw somebody in jail and then investigate, but to investigate and then see if there's a crime that has been committed, and then if you can convict.
And then he asks J.D. Vance here what he thought about the rule. Let me play this.
No crime. J.D., please.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks, Mr. President. Thanks to the incredible team here. I was want to echo something the president said, where you say there haven't been murders in a couple of weeks in D.C., and it doesn't sound good, but then you talk to local law enforcement, and I didn't realize that this town averaged one murder every other day for the last 20, 30 years, which means that in 2 short weeks, the president and the team have saved 6 or 7 lives, people who would have been killed on the streets of D.C., who are now living, breathing, spending time with their families, because the president had the willpower to say, no more. We're not going to give the streets of D.C. over to vagrants and robbers and murderers. And the last point I want to make, sir, to your point about we want people to welcome us, to ask us, because look at Governor Pritzker in Illinois, or Governor Newsom in Los Angeles, or Governor Moore in Maryland. They are angrier about the fact that the President of the United States
Yeah, I think we lost internet there. But to his point, is we're seeing just a complete overall haul of these policies that have taken effect for, as J.D. Vance said, for 25 plus years. And so just in a matter of 2 weeks of eliminating that, and think about that, the simplicity of what he's saying, which is we saved 6 to 7 lives. I mean, that's incredible for them to say. Now you start applying these policies in other states like Chicago, like New York, even here in Shreveport, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Dallas, Houston, where the crime rates like this are kind of out of control when it comes to these because of the gang violence. And if you throw in there 12, possibly more million illegals who are causing crimes like what we saw in Florida last week with the driver who can't read or write English, is now you're saving lives of everyday Americans. And this is what got Trump elected. When you go back to the Lincoln-Riley Act and other instances where illegal immigrants have killed innocent Americans and preyed on them. And so when this deal's at the heart and he's accomplishing a promise that he said he would during his campaign, hopefully this is something leading into the midterms that everyday Americans can look at, whether they've voted Republican only or Democrat only in the past. And we'll kind of get in that here in a second with the redistricting. This is a huge battle and a narrative that Democrats are really struggling with and struggled with in this last presidential election.
Yeah, I'm still offline. It's showing me offline here. Are y'all seeing me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not your screen, but...
Oh, okay. Yeah, can we go back to that screen? Well, I got another screen. Can you pull that up? Here. And this is Trump's statement on where he's going to go with the next troops moving in. You can't pull it up.
Refresh your browser.
Okay, I tried. All right. It's showing up there. I see it now. I see it on the screen. Let's see if it plays. Can you hear it?
No, it's not.
Okay.
You need to refresh.
Okay.
But Trump, if you want to that point, while he works on that, is that Trump's talked about now specifically going into Chicago and going into New York to deal with this. I mean, this would, one, be a huge slap in the face to the Democratic leadership there, but it's also a thing of like, look, if you're not going to clean it up, we are. And if you remember back to the COVID breakouts and the riots in CHOP in Seattle, where there were federal buildings being attacked and harmed and burned and rummaged, where they had to decide whether to send in troops. And there he stalled because he was worried about re-election or whatever. But right now he's saying, no, let's go for it. Let's clean this up. Let's show them how we can do this. Let's show the people of these cities in Chicago and New York and St. Louis and Shreveport, Baton Rouge, New Orleans. I mean, you go city by city throughout the rest of the country and you do this and you overturn the crime rates. You stop the murders just by simply applying law and order and telling people of those cities, hey, when we arrest this person, and we're going to do our very best to, one, hold them, make sure they don't get released on cashless bail or just catch and release, and make sure that they can pay the penalty for the crimes that they are committing. And again, this isn't, yes, okay, the benefit is, okay, he can possibly, the Republicans can do positively well in the midterms, but more so is so that the people of those cities can see politicians, whether they be Republican or Democrat, who are going to side with this craziness that causes harm in their life, increase crime, and increase murder rates. It's of like, look, let's deal with this and let's lower this stuff. And whether that's a Republican or Democrat who sides with this and wants to clean this up and lower the crime rates, truly without redefining what crimes get recorded, and lower the murder rates in these cities. And here we go. He has his clip back up.
Okay, so now Trump talks about the next cities.
We haven't had to bring in the regular military, which we're willing to do. We have to. And after we do this, we'll go to another location and we'll make it safe also. We're going to make our country very safe. We're going to make our cities very, very safe. Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this. And it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one. But they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York, and we're going to help with, and I think a lot of these people that you see on television, they are, including the people in this audience, they'll say bad things about me, and then they'll say, thank God he's here, because half of them got mugged.
DC is fine.
There you go. He's really speaking to this issue that is, I think, is what helped get him elected. And if you live in Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, especially in the south side of Chicago, we had a pastor speak here a few months back who lives in that region, in that area of Chicago, daily murders. And you have a problem because the locals will not report those they know that are doing it because of the retaliation. I think if you flood it with soldiers, you're going to begin to see prosecution happen, and some of these criminals will be removed from Chicago, and you might have a chance for some peace in Chicago and other cities like that. I understand even the left's, I don't say concerns, but they're thinking, okay, this is federal intrusion. This is like the Civil War, and when the North invaded the South, but had not the North invaded the South, slavery would have continued. So there are reasons that you have to do this, and it's a very tenuous moment in time. But Chicago, I think, is probably the worst crime-ridden city. Has the most strict gun laws in America, but it's the most crime-ridden city in the nation. And the mayor, he's screaming now, and that this is wrong, and that we're not going to put up with this, that there'll be an uprising. He's actually trying to provoke the citizens of Chicago to rise up against this activity. I think if they will rally behind the soldiers, it will deal a blow to the governor. Both the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago.
Go back to what J.D. Vance just said. 25 plus years of murders happening every other day just in one city. And in the instance of 2 weeks, they've cleaned it up and saved 6 to 7 lives. Yep. Just that simple statistic right there should and can be applied in all these cities. So now you're saving lives, and there's reports now of numbers of the troops there on the ground the FBI has arrested upwards of 1,000 people since they've taken over the city. We've cleaned up the streets. People are happy. You can walk in the subway systems without worried about getting mugged. You can walk to your car without worried about getting mugged. And this is words from the people, the man on the street interviews who live there on a daily basis, who aren't just fly-ins, who are paid protesters to come in and just cause ruckus.
And I got another clip here from J.D. Vance on, I think he was on Face the Nation yesterday, where he shares the reason we're dealing with these issues.
We don't have to live like this. My message to my fellow citizens here in D.C. or all across the country would be that allowing vagrants and armed robberies to take over your city, that's a policy choice. What President Trump is showing is that if you just empower local law enforcement to arrest and prosecute the bad guys, we can take back American streets. You, as a young family, whatever the color of your skin, you should not have to cross the street because there's a crazy person yelling at your children on the other side. You should not be worried that if you take your son out for a meal at 8 o'clock in the evening, an armed robber is going to assault your family. This is a policy choice to allow lawlessness to overrun our cities. The president has made a different policy choice, and I think what he's showing the entire American community is that we don't have to live like this, and that's the biggest thing that will come out of D.C. It matters a lot for D.C., but I think it matters more for the whole country to see that if we just make better choices, we can take back our cities.
That's huge, isn't it, Zach? I mean, to say what he just said there sounds real simple, but the model is being set in D.C., and if it works there, it can work in other cities because D.C. has per capita the highest murder rate in the world, almost in the world. And one every other day is a lot of people. You're talking 200 plus people a year dying in a city that's 5 by 5, whatever miles, is a real small community. And so as he does this, I think we all want to live at peace. This is not a Republican issue. This is an American issue. I think that's why he's going to have some momentum behind this movement.
Yeah, I think that clip is great. And J.D. Vance is speaking very clearly and saying, look, do you want to live in these lawless cities or do you want to live with cities who have law and order? And so the everyday Americans in these cities understand this. Trump's right. He did very well with the black vote. He's changing, almost over 100 years of voter records, history of voting for blacks for, or more so against Republicans and for Democrats. And somebody asked the questions here in the chat on Rumble is, where are we going to put all these people? It's simple. They'll put them in jail, and if they're illegals, they'll send them back to where they came from. The Supreme Court has made that very clear. There's plenty of room there for them to be removed from this country. So the process is already set up in place, and this goes through the border as well. Just apply the laws that are already on the books. And for the people of these cities and other cities who maybe don't have these problems and may have these politicians who want to implement these cashless bail, catch and release type of policies, is look, if you just have politicians and leaders, sheriffs, police officers who will actually apply the laws on the books, and a lot of times the police officers want to apply these laws. They've been prevented in a lot of these instances and in these cities from actually upholding the law because they know the AGs in those cities and or those states just aren't going to actually apply the law and protect the people because of a political agenda.
And President Trump has said that the choice, especially for the homeless people, is that they can go into a drug rehab or they'll find a facility for them. If not, they're going to go to jail. And
he also said he'd fine them, which is kind of hilarious.
That's true. Well, they don't have any money, but
well, some of them might.
I think for me, I grew up in an era where you didn't have homelessness this way. Rarely did I ever see homelessness when I grew up anywhere I traveled in the country, because most of them on the streets were put in mental institutions or in some rehab setting. That was the norm. Now you say, well, that's cruel and unusual punishment. Well, how cruel is it to allow them to be on the streets and have to survive winters and summers and try to scavenge for food, et cetera, all that they have to do every day? At least in some facility, they might be able to get some help. I'm not saying it's the best way. We believe in deliverance. We believe that God can set these people free. And there are a lot of ministers. We have a local ministry here, a rescue mission. They attend our congregation, and they work with these people on a daily basis. And I want you to understand, I've talked to them. They know this is a good plan because they have to deal with it on a daily basis, seeing the homeless, seeing all this. And there's many reasons for homelessness, but this is the plan that they're going after. And this is what I think they think is the best solution for this right now. I think they've already cleaned up over 70 homeless encampments in D.C. I watched bulldozers just cleaning them up. I was there last year, year before, and I saw people at federal buildings with extension cords running into federal buildings with refrigerators out in the front lawn of federal buildings while they were sitting there. And that's when people travel to America and they see that. It doesn't speak well. And I think President Trump did something amazing when he said, as D.C. goes, so goes the nation. And it's a picture. I think he understands the anointing flows from the top down. Okay, we're going to shift in the last part of our program today and talk about gerrymandering. And Zach, why don't you explain what gerrymandering is first, and then we're going to play some clips of what is going on in the nation.
Yeah, we've talked about this for the past several weeks, and what we're seeing is Democrats trying to find a way to overturn the House and Senate of control. Right now, it's controlled by Republicans, 219 to 212. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to redraw the maps in Democrat-led states. California, they tried to prevent it in Texas, but it went through. In Maryland, they're looking at it, possibly Illinois, and a few other states, I think New York as well. The problem is when you do that, you have to carve up the states to a point where it's really hard to understand what the actual districts look like. And I want to try to pull this up here real quick of what... Go to mine here. Yeah, there we go. Of what Illinois itself just looks like. The blue streak in the middle of the state, of making that a portion and then kind of clumping all the Republicans together. And then you also get into California as well, of how it's drawn, if I could find it real quick. But the issue here is is what they're trying to do is they're trying to carve out, especially in California, there are 4 Republican seats, and they're trying to wipe out the rest of them, which means these people no longer have a representative who's going to advocate for policies that they might agree with. And it's going to say, let's take, take Illinois, for example. In this map here, it's going to say, okay, let's clump the bottom right here, this blue map, and then clump all the red parts there. So usually what it means is there's a big city in there that'll outweigh all these rural towns and districts here. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to find a way to strategically put certain controls over vast forces of population into either Republican or Democrat. And look, Republicans do some of this as well. They just call it redistricting to their favor. And the challenge is that's going to go before the Supreme Court is whether it could be race-based, ethnicity-based more so, or can it be due just to the population? Historically, it has been the Federalist Papers kind of lay this out, is the founders wanted it to be based upon the population. The idea was for it to be done once a decade, but there has been a history of it being done like before the midterms. And the whole heart of it is if you're going to do it, make sure you're accurate in how this plays out. And this gets back into why it's important for the U.S. Census to actually only be given to U.S. citizens and not illegals to do this. I don't know if you want to go into this.
Yeah, I got a clip here from J.D. Vance talking about that very issue, about the illegals affecting the vote.
Of course, people who are here and who are not documented are not eligible to vote. But
they're not eligible to vote, but they do go in the congressional apportionment. That's why California has so many more seats, is because they count illegal aliens. So even though they don't vote, well, some of them actually do vote, but hopefully most of them don't, they end up getting congressional representation that ought by right go to American citizens.
I know, of course, people who are here
and
and who are not documented are not eligible to vote.
And we should have. 1, if the Democrats hadn't aggressively gerrymandered, and 2, if illegal aliens weren't counted in the census for purposes of apportioning congressional seats. The best estimates I've seen is that in California, for example, has 5 additional congressional seats than it should have because they count illegal aliens for the purpose of apportioning representatives. Meanwhile, Ohio, my home state, lost a representative. We're literally losing representatives for American citizens in order to give congressional representation to illegal aliens. Republicans are trying to balance out the scales a little bit for basic fairness and for the integrity of our democracy, which the president cares about as much as anybody in the country.
Now that's huge, what he just said there, because the fact is that they're creating these districts based on illegals being in the state. Now, President Trump is trying to write executive orders to deal with that so that they're not part of the census. Well, he's actually put an order out to do another census and remove the illegals, which the Democrats are screaming at, and understandably so, because if they don't get those numbers, then they're going to lose many seats in the Congress. And we could actually see a 20-seat shift. They said 20 to 30 seat shift in Congress if they were to do that.
Yeah, and the clip I want to play here is from the governor of Massachusetts, Governor Moore, and this is what he had to say over the weekend of the goal here for Democrats when it comes to gerrymandering.
Redistricting, or gerrymandering, as some people know it. You've said you don't like talking about it, but all options are on the table when it comes to your state. There's only one seat here that is actually Republican, and it's a seat held by Representative Andy Harris. Are you considering trying to redraw lines in Maryland?
Yeah, when I say all options are on the table, all options are on the table.
Are you actively looking at it now?
Yeah, because
the simple thing to say is all legal options are on the table. So the fact that he's saying all options are on the table, meaning we're going to do whatever it takes to get this job done, whether legal or not legal. He needs to clarify that. He's a person of high position. That's very simple for him to say.
And I think we have to. Yes, and I think we have to, because I think what's happened is this is what people hate about politics in the first place. The fact that the president of the United States, very similar to what he did in Georgia, where he called up a series of voter registrants and said, I need you to find me more votes. We're watching the
Fact check, false.
same thing now where he's calling up legislatures around the country and saying, I need you to find me more congressional districts.
He's doing it. That may be different, but Democrats redistrict. You know that.
And so here's what she's saying is, okay, if Trump's going to do that, she's not going to push back and say, well, that's not really true. She's trying to say we shouldn't do what Trump's doing.
Yeah.
But Gavin Newsom's doing it right now. A few years ago in New York, we saw this. This can backfire. Do you really want to go down this road?
I want to make sure that we have fair lines and fair seats, where we don't have situations where politicians are choosing voters, but that voters actually have a chance to choose their elected officials. We need to be able to have fair maps. And we also need to make sure that if the President of the United States is putting his finger on the scale to try to manipulate elections because he knows that his policies cannot win in a ballot box, then it behooves each and every one of us to be able to keep all options on the table to ensure that the voters' voices can actually be heard
And you
and we
don't
can have
think
maps.
in that one district where they have a Republican representative that they are actively being represented in Maryland?
I think if you look at maps across the country, less than 10% of congressional seats.
This right here is scary of what he's about to say. If you understand this, he just listen. This is scary.
Are actually competitive by nature, less than 10%. And
He says less than 10% of seats for Congress are actually competitive.
so if you look at the average win margin in our state and so many states, the average win margin is upwards of 20 to 30%. So that means we already have so many gerrymandered areas that we have to be able to add a measure of fairness in the way that it's applied.
Despite
And so here we're seeing just an astronomically crazy policy trying to be pushed through because we want it. And here's the issue. Is the reason this has kind of come about is since the Civil War, they have allowed maps to be redrawn so that representation for ethnicity has been into play, because in the past in the South, it was, kind of fought against. And so there has been some instances that the Supreme Court has looked at and said, okay, you are allowed to do this. The question now is do you continue to allow that to be the case? And this is the argument before the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
This is what they have to decide upon. Are we going to continue to allow this to be done because Democrats think that it should, because there might have been something done 80-something years ago? And the question is well, if you pass the Civil Rights Act in 1964, show us the instances of where these crimes of racial injustices have taken place so that can be dealt with to prevent the crimes that you say are happening, so that people who aren't being represented can be represented. But then now we got to go, if that's the case, if that's what the Civil Rights Act dealt with, then now you got to go back to drawing the lines of the maps in these states and these cities based upon population, not on necessarily ethnicity, and then the breakdowns of those. And this is the argument before the Supreme Court. This is the reason we're bringing this up, is one, so we're aware of this and know how to pray, but also for people in these cities and these areas to realize the battle and the belief here. Like, if you talk about Trump derangement syndrome, I mean, he is extremely motivated here, the governor of Maryland, of combating what he believes, whether it's true or not. He doesn't even care to look at. It's just he's staying in this bubble and saying, well, Trump's doing this. And even the CNN reporter there was like, look, Democrats are doing the exact same thing. So what are we going to do? Oh, we're going to do the exact same thing Trump's doing? And he's right. The governor's right. This is politics. This is the nerdy battles that people are doing. But it costs us our freedom if we don't stand up to it and stay engaged.
Okay, so what do we do? How do we pray? You need to pray for a Golden Court case, which is before the Supreme Court, which Zach just mentioned. A redistricting in Louisiana, of all places. It's us. Let me read a little bit here. It's called Callis versus Landry, Landry being our governor. It's supposed to go before the Supreme Court on October 15th of this year. And it's a challenge to Louisiana's congressional map, which includes a second majority black district created in response to a lower court ruling that the state's original map likely violated the Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court will determine whether the intentional creation of a second majority black district violates the 14th or 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution. This is huge because this is a constitutional issue. The federal district court found in Louisiana 2022 congressional map which only had one majority black district, violated Section 2 of the Voters' Right Act. So to comply with this ruling, we have to see a change here. Basically, we played this a month or so ago. It's illegal to create a district based on race. It's illegal. Because you could do that for whites. You could do that for Asians. You could do that for anybody. So it's illegal to do that. And they've done that in Louisiana. So this case may actually determine the 2026 election completely. Because if they rule it's unconstitutional, basically to gerrymander based on this issue, then all maps are up for grabs. Illinois, Maryland, New York, California, everything. And you may have to go back to the way the founding fathers agreed to divide the states. And so if you can pray for any issue, you need to pray for this golden court case, that justice would prevail and that the judges would have wisdom, because this is a bigger issue than we realize, because this means that we will not have taxation with representation if we do not see a shift in the way we do this. So California, what he just said there about Maryland, one district, and he's willing to take it away from the Republicans there. So if you're a Republican in Maryland, you're paying your taxes and you have no representation. It's the very reason we had the Revolutionary War. And you may see types of uprisings occur because of this. I think this case here, the Callis versus Landry case, is the one you need to be praying into.
Yeah, you said something there about the Supreme Court. Something to pray is the decision is, okay, if they rule it's illegal to gerrymander based upon ethnicity, you need to go back to drawing the maps based upon populations. The question then is, once that rule is done, how fast does it need to be enforced? Is it, okay, next time the maps are redrawn, this is how it's done, which kicks the can down the road, or is it something that needs to be done immediately? And then things are going to have to start speed rolling. So there's several states, Republican, that this would benefit. Obviously, how it turns out in California, but then you'd have to do a census. So there's a lot, and the reason I bring all of these, the nitty gritty up, is because this is the logistics of it. These are the things we want to pray for, because if the Supreme Court isn't focused, if the lawyers for either side aren't focused, these are things that can slip through the cracks and then cost us freedoms, cost us representation here that he's bringing about, and something that is very important in the fight for freedom. And, you know, he talks about fair there. Well, faith, family, freedom that Mike Johnson talks about, even Trump's kind of pointing back at, is those kind of foundation principles in there. And if you can't fairly apply the law for freedom, then that's the injustice that is trying to be dealt with in this current political cycle.
And President Trump did sign an executive order to do away with mail-in balloting, which is going to be challenged in the courts, because most state constitutions declare that the state can determine how they run their elections. The only other option I can see from that is that they separate federal from state elections, because on the federal ballot, like in 2026, you're going to have state elections, local elections on there as well. So that's where they have control. If President Trump and the administration would find a way to say you can't put state and local elections on the federal election, then maybe he could pull this off. But I think it's going to be a very difficult task to do. But it's the right thing to do, and there's many reasons for this. I don't want to get into conspiracies, but it's the right reason to do this, right thing to do. We're just going to have a hard time pulling it off because of court cases, and it's going to be messed up. But let's hope by 26 that the Louisiana case has precedence and would affect the districting of the states for 26 election, which, I'll be honest with you, if it were to happen and actually each state would be represented properly, you could see a massive, massive shift to the right. And you'd see 20, 30, maybe even more seats in Congress and possibly in the Senate. Well, the Senate's different, but in the Congress that could be shifted that way. So that's all I have today. You got anything, Zach?
Yeah, the last thing, I want to follow up on what I talked about last week with the FOMC meetings with Federal Chair Jerome Powell out in Jackson Hole last week. He gave a speech indicating that he's looking at in September lowering interest rates. The debate is whether it be 0.5 percentage point or 1/4 percentage point. More than likely, the census on that is that it's going to lean to 1/4. quarter interest rate drop, and then continued ones after that. And the market loved that. They love some understanding. And the issue is the underlying numbers. The Federal Reserve, I talked about it last week. Why would Powell not be lowering interest rate despite what the numbers are saying? Is the federal chair and the federal chairman themselves are focused so much on unemployment. And the theory is that if employment is good, then it ultimately raises inflation, and so they want to hamper that. And it's kind of diabolical and perverse in a sense. But the reality is, I want to pull this up. Let's look at this last quarter. Let's get nerdy here for a second. This is from the Federal Reserve's own website, St. Louis Fed. If you see here, the top left corner, I'm going to highlight it. It's 1.1 trillion dollars. These are in units in billion dollars. So it's basically $1,130 billion, which is $1.1 trillion last quarter that the U.S. government paid out in interest payments. That's not the debt. That's just the interest on the debt. We've kind of talked about it a little bit. Mike Johnson has pointed this out. And this is from the Fed's own website, from the St. Louis Fed. And so what we're seeing here is the rising increase. And I lay that out because I want to play this point right here. This is a clip from former Chrysler and Home Depot CEO Bob Nordelli, who talks about how businesses are actually looking at this interest and making decisions.
One of the Fed board members said, well, we shouldn't worry about interest rates relative to our debt. And that's what businesses do, Maria. I mean, any chance we get to refinance and change our interest on debt, and the United States is a big business. So I'm kind of surprised that they aren't sensitive to that issue, Maria.
And that's concerning. Oh, what's the big deal about interest? It's not that big of a deal. Well, here's the thing is when the Fed's looking at these numbers, Trump's saying, okay, we're bringing all these investments in, we're bringing manufacturing home. These businesses are kind of at a standstill of saying, okay, let's go after investing. Well, what they're hoping for, and this has kind of been out there in the ether for a while, is in September interest rates will drop because they didn't do it this last cycle in July. Is okay, now that we can do this, then it'll ramp up the short term, which if they're going to take these investments on with lower interest rate, that's the possibility of more jobs, which if that's what the Fed's so focused on in one, fighting unemployment, and then fighting inflation, which they're forgetting about, is okay, now that we lower these interest rates for America, this helps lower the interest payments that are out there, but then also you're allowing the possibility of more jobs to be played out. And there's a clip from Steve Forbes on Fox. I don't want to play it, but it's basically like, look, the Fed should be focused on the value of the dollar. And I'm saying all this to say is, out of what Jerome Powell said last week in his speech at Jackson Hole, which I brought up, that is something we needed to pay attention to. There was hardly any mention, if none, from what I have heard so far, of talks about dealing with the value of the dollar, which is lowering because the European Central Bank is lowering interest rates. And this is what Wall Street and people are just not understanding what the Fed is doing. And Steve Forbes talks about it. He said it is very perverse what they're doing, and that's very simple. And even this clip from Steve Nardelli or Bob Nardelli talking about what one of the Fed chairs said is, "Oh, what's the big deal? Why do we need to worry about high interest rates? What's the matter if interest payments are high? That's less money that can go towards one, paying off principal, and or creating jobs that can help the American people." And the issue Trump's dealing with of trying to bring manufacturing home is, one, jobs, obviously, but for national security reasons. And if you saw the report today of the federal government buying up 10% of Intel for the chips, I need to dive into that to see what exactly that entails. But there is an argument for kind of national security reasons for that to happen. We'll see if that's a good or bad thing, depending on the deal, the details within the deal there of understanding how beneficial that'll be for the American people and the American public and the safety of the nation there. But the reality is Trump's, during COVID, we saw it. Look, all these essentials, manufacturing chips, PPE, even some vaccines and other things that are produced overseas and then brought in, that's problematic when you have a crisis on your hand, or, there's talks of World War III with Russia, China, and Iran. Okay, what happens if we have all our manufacturing over there that's cut off? What does that mean for America? Where are we going to produce this stuff, et cetera? So I say all that to say is we want to continue to focus on this. And as I said last week, the prayer here, because it's believed right now, Powell isn't lowering interest rates and hasn't for some time because of the personal attacks from Trump on Powell. And we want to continue to pray for Trump, his administration. And look, the word on the street is that there's one Fed chair that's going to be removed because of mortgage fraud. That's still yet to be determined. She's going to have to go through a probationary period where she kind of steps down, but somebody can vote proxy in her stead. And then there's a possibility of 2, maybe in a 3 in total, stepping down and then their terms ending, and then Trump putting 3 back in before the end of his term, possibly replacing Jerome Powell. So in the long run, Trump's going to have his option of putting people who he would want on the Fed in these Fed chair positions throughout the seats that are there. So in the long run, Trump can have his say, but right now, him forcing a square peg into a round hole is rubbing Jerome Powell and the Fed the wrong way, because what they're focused on is unemployment. And while that is a side effect, it's like, you cut an artery. You got to really stop the bleeding. You can't just throw a Band-Aid on it and hope that it stops. You got to really figure out, okay, how can we stop this? And what they're doing is they're just trying to slap a Band-Aid right now over unemployment and saying, well, if things get too good, it's going to be harmful for everybody. And that's not, and you could get into economic theory, but that's not really the focus of the Fed. The focus is on monetary policy. And so I say all that to say is on the Fed side is we need to pray for those leaders to get clarity and focus on their mission. And then 2, on President Trump, to pray for that, hey, look, let's not create these personal attacks because it's harming the American people. Okay, in your eyes, you're right. And I would honestly agree with President Trump on this, because we got, and maybe you can speak to this, the $1.1 trillion in interest payments alone in the second quarter of this year. That's astronomical. And if we keep going on these trends, and over 30% of these bonds that are at these high interest rates are owned by foreign investors and some foreign governments, more so, that's something that can easily be cut if Jerome Powell would lower interest rates and continue to cut them.
Well, and this is a big issue. We're talking about future generations. We're talking about our children, our grandchildren. And I think Mike Johnson is probably the most vocal voice on this. And I think Thune is as well in the Senate. We've got to deal with this debt. Well, we've given you a lot to pray about today. I hope this encouraged you, gave you insight. Thanks for listening to Pipeline Report. We'll be back with you again next Monday at 12 noon Central. Thanks for being with us. We love you. May God bless you, and may God bless America.